Hi, I'm Jacob Murphy. I'm here with Bob Canada. We're going to show you some tests displaying the differences between the MX Sport, the MXT, and the MX5. Well, we're going to balance it to ferrite first so that we get a good ground balance point, and then we're going to test the depth on it, see how far we can read out just in the air. This is the MXT All Pro. We're going to see how far out this thing can detect a nickel. Let's make sure the gain's maxed out. What do you think?
You see it better than that.
Yeah. 10 maybe? That's 11. It starts to get hard to hear around 12.
Yeah. It's 12.
Okay. All right. Try quarter next. Yeah. Somewhere between 9 and 10, like 9.5. It's okay.
It's 10.
Yeah, it's okay. I think we can do better. So it looks like the MXT at maximum gain can read a nickel about 12 inches out and a quarter about 9.5. Yeah. That's at full gain, just in the air, just maximum depth you can get. All right. Next up's the MX5. Same test. Let me crank the sensitivity up. It is noisy.
It's balance. Bring up your balance and track.
Tracking's always on this one. Yeah, you can't lock the tracking, so we're just gonna have to go with that. 12. You can get it out there a ways. 12 sounds good. Go out a little farther. About 13?
12 and a half, maybe.
You think 12 and a half before you?
Yeah.
Yeah, the rest is noise. Maybe 13 if you're lucky. But as you can hear, there's a lot of noise in there too. There's a lot of chattering as soon as you crank this thing up to maximum sensitivity. All right, and that was the nickel, right? This guy does a little bit better than the MXT. 10, 10 and a half. Maybe 11?
10 and a half.
10 and a half. All right. So it looks like the MX5 can achieve about a depth of 12 and a half inches on a nickel, and it was getting around 10 and a half on the quarter. A little bit better than the MXT, but still pretty good. MX Sport. We'll do the same test on this one that we've done on all the others. Set it up. All right, go ahead. All right, we're good. All right, I'm gonna lock the tracking. So what we just did there is we're balancing to ferrite. Makes it so that all our tests are consistent with one another. We want to make sure that we've got the same ground tracking point. We use these little ferrite beads here to give us a consistent point between all the detectors. We've just got it here. This little part here on the end is the ferrite bead that we use. The tracking's locked to that ferrite, so you can go ahead and start swinging. All right, this is the nickel, yeah? All right, about 13. 13 and a half occasionally. But you can hear it stands out a lot more than the MX5. The MX5 had all that noise when we cranked up the sensitivity on it so high. This one comes out a lot cleaner. You can pick out that target. It's very clear. It kind of bangs out and hits you in the face. Yeah, I'd say about 11 and a half. All right, so yeah, the MX Sport, I'd say that the nickel comes up about 13, maybe slightly more than 13 inches air depth. The quarter comes out 11 and a half. Pretty good though. One of the big improvements here is that the targets sound out a lot clearer with this guy than it did with the MX5. We got out to the end of the MX5 range and you couldn't tell the targets from the noise hardly. this one, you've got a pretty clear indication. We perform the test with each of these detectors at as similar settings as we possibly can. Certain units, like the MX5, you can't lock the tracking, so we balanced it to ferrite and left it there. It may wander a little bit, but that's just something you have to pay for when you don't have the track lock available. Other than that, they're all running at maximum sensitivity in a coin and jewelry program so that you can see the differences. All right, now that we've completed our depth tests, I want to talk about the tracking system improvements between each of these three detectors. The MXT had a pretty quick tracking system. You could get to a ground balance point pretty fast, and a lot of people liked that. So we moved a lot of that over to the MX5. The tracking systems between the two are almost identical, with the exception that this one does not have the ability to lock your tracking. We made a number of improvements on the MX Sport. We brought over that ability to lock your tracking again, and we gave it a ground readout screen that'll show you the phase and amplitude of whatever ground you're trying to track to. In addition, we made some improvements to the tracking system from the previous generations. This one, the MX Sport, has a much more precise ground tracking. It'll still go just as fast as the older two, but now it'll lock to the ground with a much higher degree of precision. You won't see it bouncing around the ground balance point as much as you did with the MX5 or the MXT, which means that you won't hear as much variation in your threshold. So now we're going to do a test to demonstrate the tracking capabilities of the MX5 versus the MX Sport. The MX5 has got the same tracking technology in it as the MXT. It tracks pretty quickly. One of the downsides, though, is you can't ever lock the tracking, so if you run into a smaller target, it has a tendency to track out those smaller targets. But I'm going to put this guy into all metal mode, and we will use that to demonstrate how quickly this guy will track to the ground. You'll hear our signal until it's balanced. Now this is black sand. This stuff's pretty nasty. It's hard to track to, but eventually it gets there. You can hear slight variations in the sand. So now we'll bring it over to the red dirt pit. The red dirt pit is just as nasty as the black sand, but in the opposite phase direction, so you'll hear a large shift at first as it tracks to it. With a few pumps it manages to get there, and you can hear that there's a little bit of instability as it looks for the ground balance point, but it's close enough that you can throw a target down there, and it picks it up pretty easily out of the ground. Now we're going to perform the same test on the MX Sport, show you a side-by-side comparison of how the tracking systems in each of these machines operates. All right, so I'll enable the tracking. I'm going to put it in all metal mode so you guys can hear the difference. Just like the MX5, it takes a couple pumps to get it there, but it picks up this nasty black sand pretty quick. Now the difference is I can lock the tracking on here, so it's not wandering around the ground balance point as I move across the ground. And again, it can throw this quarter down here. Picks it up pretty easily. Now the red dirt pit. I'll leave the tracking locked so you guys can hear that it's not going to balance to this. The tracking's locked, it's not going to move to that point anymore, but it's still doing the tracking in the background, so when you want to unlock the tracking, this is the ground readout screen. You can get to this by holding the track button. This allows you to see what the machine is tracking to currently. You've got the amplitude of the ground signal down here, as well as the phase that it's currently tracking to. It's pretty quick to jump right to it. And again, you don't hear the instabilities in there. And I can lock the tracking to make sure that it's not going to bounce around. Throw this quarter down. And it picks it up on top of this red dirt, no problem. Okay, so our next test, we're going to show the recovery speed of each of these units. We've got the MXT All Pro here. And down here we've got our board set up. We've got a nail set next to a quarter, and we're going to see how close we can get that nail to that quarter and still be able to pick up the quarter. Let's move this nail closer and see how close we can get it. Bring it down to 2 inches. Okay. Let's try it right on top of it. Now when the nail is oriented in that fashion, it's pretty easy to pick up the quarter underneath. When you turn it, things get a little more complicated. You can hear that low iron grunt sound. It's having a hard time finding that quarter 2 inches away. Move it out to 3. It's getting something. But it's not picking out that high quarter sound. It's 4 inches. Gets a little more distinct. Let's try 6 inches. Starting to hear some distinction. You can actually hear 2 targets in there. And there we go, we got that quarter sound. So if you got a nail oriented in a vertical pattern, you can actually pick up a quarter right underneath the nail. However, when you turn the nail sideways, the double D here in particular has a real hard time distinguishing between the two. With the MXT, we were 6 inches apart before we could detect the quarter reliably. Well, for the purposes of our recovery time test, we're gonna have to swap loops between the MX5 and the MXT because the MXT has got its double D loop and we wanna be in parity with the MX Sport, which also comes with a double D loop. All right, now we've got the MX5. We put the MXT double D coil on it because we want to be using the same coil shape between each of these. The MX Sport comes standard with a 10-inch double D. The MXT has got a double D. So we had to swap out the MX5 because it came with this spider coil here, this concentric spider coil. Putting the double D on it will make sure that our recovery tests are in parity with one another. It's a little quiet, but you can hear the breakup in the threshold means that it's discriminating out that nail and still picking up the quarter. I'm getting an 86 for VDI right now. Let's see if we can move this nail on top of the quarter, still pick it out. You can still hear it pick it up. Now if we make things a little more difficult on this double D loop and turn this nail horizontal, we'll see if we can still pick it up. You can see that it's going quiet for that nail and still picking up that quarter on the back end. It's a little bit quiet, but it's there. It's having a little bit of trouble with the VDI. It's giving me 14 right now. That's giving me a decent signal. Let's see if we move this nail on top of the quarter, see how it does. Still able to pick it up, but it's giving me numbers all over the place. All right, and that's the recovery on the MX5. Okay, so now one thing we're gonna do with the MX Sport is we wanna showcase the new reject volume feature. We've got it set up so that anything that's rejected, which I'm gonna reject out the iron range, is gonna come in with a low tone and a lesser volume. I've got it set up in 2-tone mode. So this will show how you can pick out a nail and still hear the quarter right behind it. Turn up the rejection volume so you can hear it a little bit better. can hear that it goes low right here on this nail before it hits that quarter. And we can get going pretty fast, still pick up that quarter. Well, let's see what happens if we put this nail on top of the quarter. We can do that. When the nail's vertically aligned, we can pick out that quarter right underneath the nail though. All right, now that we've finished our recovery tests, let me summarize. The MXT did a pretty good job on its recovery speed. It had quite a bit of trouble as soon as you turn that nail sideways though. You could see that there were a bit of improvements on the MX5. We could pick up that horizontal nail a lot closer. The problem with the MX5, however, was that it's really difficult to hear the distinction between those two targets. So when we made the MX Sport, we included that audio, that reject volume feature, so that as you're swinging over it, you can tell there's two targets here. One is going low and the other is going high, and there's a clear distinction between the two. It really slaps you in the face that there's likely a nail right behind or right on top of that quarter. So the MXT and the MX5 were a couple of our most popular units. For the MX Sport, we made significant improvements over the features that made those units so popular and put them in a light waterproof case. Three of the things I demonstrated today were that it had better air depth, better target recovery, and better tracking. If you guys want to see anything more about the MX Sport, feel free to hit us up on Facebook.